There's a little bit of a confusion though. I come over here into Maya Cube default. This is the one that is not scaled. That is actually smaller inside of Maya. So let's go back over to Maya and make this really clear. As clear as we can for this subject. So I'm going to set the scale back to 1. That's the default. When I'm looking at this guy in Zbrush, you're not going to see the same difference that you see inside of Maya. This is one of the points I'm trying to make here. You've got these two, and nothing is changing on that grid. Nothing at all. Even though I have grid and tile set in ELV. Okay, and there's a reason why. Why are these looking like they are the exact same size? Are these the exact same size? Let me ask you that. Are these two cubes the exact same size inside of Zbrush? Why do they appear to be the exact same size? Well, first off, they are definitely not the same size. Okay, the key thing is that we remember that Zbrush is doing one really significant thing on import. It scales every object to one Zbrush unit. Every object is scaled into one Zbrush unit. And so, in a sense, this cube, which is in real world smaller than this other one, it's scaled inside of Zbrush to be the same, and that scale is this number. Okay? Now this number doesn't, you can change this number left, right, and center, and it doesn't make any difference because it's an export. So it's an export setting. We could change that and it would make it different size inside of Maya, which we do not want to do. But basically, this scale factor is affecting things. So how do we get these guys to be in real-world relationship to each other? What is the easiest way to get them in a real-world relationship to each other? What do you think? There's only one feature that does this. It's pretty simple. You use it all the time. So what is the one feature that's going to put these in real-world relationship to each other? Subtools. So I can go to the larger one or the smaller one. It does not matter, but I am going to introduce kind of a bit of trivia. So hold this next piece of information I'm going to give you as a separate, discrete piece of information. The recommendation is that you always choose the largest object as the top object. That's the recommendation because everything else is going to get kind of scaled out from there. So let me see if I can explain this. So let's go. This is one ZBrush unit. This is two ZBrush units. You know, this might be it might take us a little longer to explain, but the recommendation is choose the largest. The actual real-world implications of this are pretty negligible, unless what you were doing, and I'll give you the exact scenario, unless what you did is you chose the toenail of a dragon as the top subtool, and then you appended all the rest of the dragon, which just so happened to have very large feet. And then those feet were very small compared to the fact that now you've got this massive body, and you've got the wings, you've got another leg doing all kinds of stuff. If you have that kind of situation, and this tiny little toenail is that top subtool, you are going to run into problems. You're going to run into spatial problems. Brushes aren't going to work right because this is one ZBrush unit, so the entire dragon becomes something like 1,000 ZBrush, 10,000 ZBrush units. That's going to screw things up because that's going to then affect your draw size. It's also going to affect how Z intensity calculates. It's basically going to change the math and ZBrush isn't set up for that. But if you have a character, some dude hanging out, I don't know what that is, looks like something from Henry Moore. If you've got a character here, you probably want to import the character and make him the top, and then the belt, and then the armor, and all of that stuff. All of that would be the knee pad, would be separate. You wouldn't really want the knee pad to be the top one. It's not going to cause the same problems as the dragon, but it does mean that if that's one ZBrush unit, well, now you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 ZBrush units tall, and it's just not this. It's not a position of strength. It's going to affect draw size and the intensity a little bit. So anyways, we select the top, and then we're going to append everything else. And this is how you set real-world measurements. So append, or I shouldn't say real-world measurements. This is where you set a real-world relationship. And this is exactly what you see inside of Maya. Any questions about that? Let's stop and just regroup, because that was a lot of, it was a cube on a cube, could be prone for a lot of problems. Ryan saying that object scaling is kind of weird, and it is definitely weird, and it's going to get a little weirder. But any questions before I move on? All right, let's establish a few fundamental rules. Okay, these are fundamental rules. So if you're dealing with one object, ZBrush will scale to 1 ZB unit. Okay, it's just always going to do that, so that basically all of the objects inside of ZBrush are going to look the same. It doesn't matter how big they are, how small they are, or anything like that. If you need to have two objects, if they need to be relational, that should be a Facebook status update. I am relational now. Need to be relational or related to each other in size, then you have to just use subtools. Okay. Now the why. Okay. Why does every object need to be 1 ZBrush unit? I've already told you. I've already hinted when I gave you the problem. Okay. The reason why is because of the brush system. It's real simple, real straightforward. The culprit is the brush system. And that's because, see this draw size of 64? What is that? Is that 64 centimeters? Is that 64 inches? Is that 64 millimeters? What is that 64? Well, it's slightly arbitrary. It does actually have to do with pixel space, the size of the actual pixels on your screen and the size of the canvas. But this arbitrariness means that you really want to establish one unit that we are transferring pixel into poly, so that we don't have a bunch of different scales that we're adjusting. So poly for let's say if it's measured in feet or measured in inches or centimeters or millimeters, right? In Maya you can, or Maya Maximoto, you can do all of that. You can measure things in feet, you can measure things in inches, you can centimeters, millimeters. But when you bring that into ZBrush, this conversion of pixel space into polygons starts to encounter noise when you go way up into the feet. So taking the size of a brush here and scaling that way up into inches or miles starts to introduce noise. And noise in a brush stroke is not wanted. You want that brush to be exactly what the alpha is. But if you have to scale that alpha into miles, dimensions, then you have to have all kinds of algorithms that kind of adjust for the noise factor and things of that nature. So can anybody restate that? Restate the why. Why does ZBrush use a 1 ZBrush unit for scale? Kathleen's got it, efficiency of math, but really very specifically it is to reduce the amount of noise in your brush system. That's really the, if you were a programmer, you would have a user story or something like that that would very specifically say, all right, we are going to create a very standardized ZBrush unit to reduce the amount of noise in somebody's brush stroke. That's a very technical reason, but at least now you're armed when somebody says, man, ZBrush's scale system is just whacked. You can say it is 100% whacked, and you know the reason why is because of this programming thing. It's because of the way, you know, noise gets introduced as you start to play with different matrices, as you transpose actions into different different measurement systems, feet, inches, stuff like that. So I've harped on that for a while. Any questions there? Then just let me know. But otherwise, just keep in mind, 1 ZBrush unit, it's always going to be, if it's one object, it's going to just get scaled to 1 ZBrush unit, and that's really to facilitate noise. If you've got 2 objects and you need them to relate, you just use subtools. Not complicated. You've already done this a million times. But now you know why, and now you know what the system is. But let's dig in a little deeper, make sure that we really understand what's going on here.